About a year ago, I started this oil painting, and months after meticulous, careful work, I finally finished it. It began when someone watched my video, Painting in the Emerald Isles, a plein air adventure through Ireland, a country that means a lot to me because two of my grandparents grew up there. That video resonated with her enough to message me and ask, "Are you available for an oil painting commission?" And from that moment, we went on a journey together. We agreed on the concept, the story, the price. I ordered the materials, and I began my largest oil painting commission to date. In this video, I'm going to show you the process of how this painting came to life, from the first rough stages all the way to completion. And at the end, I handed it over to a very happy client called Tara, who not only paid me 10% extra, but took me out for lunch and wrote me a poem to say thank you. Oil painting has been my favourite medium ever since I properly trained it back in my Queenstown, New Zealand days when I was travelling the world. But when I came back to England, I hardly painted in oils at all. I leaned more into digital art and more portable travel-friendly world of watercolour and gouache for plein air trips. I did keep a little practice going after returning from South America, mostly through longer portrait and figure sessions at my local life drawing studio. But even then, oil painting was never fully back in my life. And yet, in the background, I could feel it calling me again. Because every time I looked at the old masters, I kept wondering, could I ever create large, epic, narrative paintings where the figure and the landscape come together in one cinematic story? And that thought came in waves throughout 2025, during this commission and in the months after. So when Tara's commission came in, I knew I couldn't rush it. I hadn't truly painted in oils for over a year, so before I even started the main piece, I gave myself a refresher. I painted a series of small master studies to get back into the flow, to get my colour mixing sharp again, to get my brush control back, and to rebuild confidence before committing to the final painting. At the same time, Tara and I discussed what surface I should paint on, and in the end, I ordered a master quality linen panel just under A2 size, mounted onto an aluminium and foam core so it's archival, solid, and built to last generations if it's cared for properly. Honestly, it was the best painting surface I'd ever worked on. Once it arrived, I started with a thin, warm wash of burnt sienna. It gives the whole piece a subtle glow underneath, and it makes the blank white surface feel less intimidating. Then I let it dry, while I continued finishing those smaller studies. And when the panel was ready, I got started. I mapped out a grid because Tara had provided a photo reference, and I wanted to stay true to the proportions. Then I began sketching in the composition using burnt umber and burnt sienna with a long, flat brush. And whenever I made a mistake, I'd wipe it back with a rag while it was still wet and sketch it again. Simple, clean, no fear. Once the composition felt right, I moved straight to the most important part of the whole painting, Tara's mum's face. Even though this is a large canvas, her mum is just one figure inside a much bigger scene, an Irish coastal landscape near Cork, where she was from. So her face and hands were actually quite small, which meant they were the most delicate parts to paint. Everything had to be controlled, Steady hand, fine strokes, no rushing. To help with the skin tones, I took inspiration from an oil painting I did a few years ago, and I leaned into a palette close to Lazorn palette. Cadmium red, yellow ochre, titanium white and ivory black. I didn't lock myself into those 4 colours for the whole painting, but for the face and skin. It gave me a grounded, realistic range of flesh tones without overcomplicating things. And from there, the figure started to come alive. I worked on this painting whenever I could, sometimes during the day, sometimes late at night in my studio, depending on work, life and everything else going on. But the rule was always the same. Each session, move it forward. Once I was happy with the first layers of the face and arms, I started blocking in the clothing. Tara's mum was wearing a blue bomber jacket with a light grey long sleeve top underneath. For the jacket I mixed combinations of ultramarine blue, titanium white, burnt umber, burnt sienna and a touch of phthalo green. And at this stage I wasn't working perfectly section by section. I'd move around the painting naturally, building it like a puzzle, letting the whole piece develop together. After the local colour was in, I pushed the shadows, the creases, the folds and the form. Once the figure had a strong foundation, I moved into the landscape behind her, starting with the grassy field. For the greens, I used a mix of sap green, yellow ochre and burnt sienna to warm and slightly desaturate it. Then I introduced titanium white. I began laying in some thinner transparent washes so I could build the surface gradually. This is one of the magical things about Ireland and the British Isles, that lush green against the cool blues of the sky, even on an overcast day. And let's be honest, it usually is. But even then, the palette is beautiful. Greys and soft blues, turquoise coastal tones, warm browns in the earth, and endless variations of green. I've travelled to 52 countries, and maybe I'm biased being Anglo-Celtic, but I genuinely think Ireland holds some of the most magical landscapes in the world, even after living in Australia and spending years in New Zealand. At one point, Tara and I decided to make a small change to the rock where her mum is sitting. So after I laid in the first pass of green across the canvas, I sketched that adjustment in. And then I moved onto the part I'd been waiting for, that epic Irish sky. For the sky, I mixed a palette of titanium white, ultramarine blue, quinacridone magenta, burnt sienna and burnt umber. And I started by painting around the clouds first, letting the sky shape itself naturally. There were warm and cool shifts happening all across the atmosphere, soft violets, muted blues, hints of warmth pinking through. And I wanted it to feel believable, but also cinematic. There were warm and cool shifts happening all across the atmosphere. Soft violets, muted blues, hints of warmth peeking through. And I wanted it to feel believable, but also cinematic. Once the sky was established, I dropped back down to the ocean and the outer cliffside, carefully painting around the rock formations and thinking about the movement of the waves beneath them. And then something happened. I hit a point where I was completely in the zone for long stretches. So much that either I forgot to record parts of it or the files disappeared along the way. So there's a jump in the footage. And suddenly the painting has moved forward dramatically. The foreground grass is in, the landscape is fleshed out, the major shapes are built, and the whole process, the whole piece starts to feel real. From there, it became this constant process of going back and forth, moving around the canvas, refining each area, and returning again the next day with fresh eyes. And through all of it, I stayed in contact with Tara. I'd send updates, she'd share thoughts, and we made subtle adjustments together as the painting developed. The grass in the foreground was one of the trickiest parts to paint. It needed rhythm and flow, movement in different directions, and most importantly, it needed to guide the viewer's eye back into the focal point, which was always Tara's mum. Because even though the canvas is large and the face and hands are small, and they're the emotional centre of the whole piece. In fact, my favourite part of the painting was working on her mum's face and hands. It was the most delicate area, the most challenging, and the most satisfying when it finally started to click. And honestly, the most fun part of any painting is the final refinement stage, when everything is already in place, and you get to focus on the small details, edges, highlights, texture, tiny shifts in colour. That's the part where the painting starts to breathe. There were a few changes Tara wanted as the piece evolved, and I made them until she was completely happy. I muted some of the greens in the foreground because they were stealing attention at first. I darkened her mum's hair, I adjusted the rock beneath her, and made a few other tweaks here and there until it all felt balanced. And I actually loved that part of the process because it stopped being just my painting. It became something we were shaping together, and that's what a commission should feel like. Most days I'd walk into the studio and this painting was the first thing I'd see. I'd stand there in silence, just looking. And almost immediately I'd start noticing what needed to happen next. Sometimes I'd paint straight away, but other times I'd just sit with it, staring at it, absorbing it, letting it settle, almost like meditation, until a new idea would arrive and I'd know exactly what the next move was. And while I was painting this, I realised how much I had missed oil painting. Not just as a medium, but as a way of working. And it made something clear to me. I wanted to return to oil painting regularly again. Not just random practice, but practice that moves me toward creating bigger studio paintings, the kind of narrative cinematic work I've always admired in the masters. Because this commission didn't just become a finished painting, it became a reminder that this is something I want to go deeper into. As the final details went in, the painting started to feel complete, like it had finally settled into itself. And stepping back from it, I realised this commission taught me something important. I can paint at this scale. I can build a realistic figure and place it inside a landscape without losing the emotion. And I can bring it all together into one composition that feels like a moment, frozen in time. Of course, I proved to myself that I could do this with digital painting in the past and painting individual figures and landscapes and things like that, but nothing quite like this. But more than anything, this painting reminded me that I'm capable of more than I've been allowing myself to create. And it brought me back to something I've always loved about oil painting, and the way the whole piece slowly comes to life over time. If you enjoyed watching the process, subscribe. I'll be sharing more paintings and more behind the scenes work like this. And if you'd like to commission an oil painting, I'll leave the inquiry link below. If you're an artist as well, and you want consistency, accountability, and live practice with other artists, you can join my community too. Sometimes a painting doesn't just get finished. It brings you back to what you're meant to be making.